Today we will be talking about condensation polymerization. Polymers are very large molecules or macromolecules made by linking together repeating units of small molecules known as monomers. And there are two broad groups of polymers, biopolymers and synthetic polymers. Biopolymers are polymers that occur naturally, like DNA, RNA, proteins, fats like triglycerides, oils, or polysaccharides like starch or glycogen, which are made by repeating units of glucose. And biopolymers are often made by the technique of condensation polymerization. The other group, synthetic polymers, there are so many examples now. Polyethylene, many versions of polythene, nylon, Teflon, so many of them. And synthetic polymers can be prepared either by condensation polymerization, which we also call step growth polymerization, or chain growth polymerization. So in OChem 1, you learned about chain growth polymerization. These are chains of repeating units of small molecules added to the end of the growing chain by either free radical reaction or by the presence of cation or anion. However, condensation polymerization occurs by two monomers combining together by the elimination of a small molecule. So let's look at an example. Again, condensation or step growth polymerization are made by linking monomers as a result of removing a small molecule, such as water or alcohol, small alcohols like methanol or ethanol, HCl, and etc. So monomers for condensation polymers should be bifunctional monomers. That means the monomer should have at least two functional groups. So it can have more than two, but it should at least have two functional groups. Like you see here, there are two carboxylic acid functional groups on the end of this monomer. And in this monomer, we have a carboxylic group and then a primary amine group. So the two functional groups of the monomer could be the same functional group, or it could be different functional groups like in this example. So always remember, if you are asked to predict the structures of the monomers for a condensation polymer, they should always be having two functional groups. As an example of condensation polymerization, we are going to look at the synthesis of nylon 6,6. And for this, we are going to use two bifunctional monomers, adyl chloride. As you can see, there are two functional groups at the end of this monomer, which is acyl chloride. And on the other monomer, we have two primary amine groups. In the process of condensation, so we have nitrogen here with two hydrogens. And what happens during the condensation is one of these hydrogens join with this chloride and leave as HCl, which is the small molecule that's generated during this condensation between these two bifunctional monomers, and there will be a new bond forming between nitrogen and this carbonyl carbon. So you can see here we have this amide bond that was prepared as a result of this condensation reaction. And you can see that this part came from adipoyl chloride, and this part came from 1,6-hexadiamine. And the big polymer is going to be a repeat of this combination. So we call it as a repeating unit, and we close it off with brackets on the side, and we put N to mean there will be multiple repeats of this repeating unit. The reason we call it nylon 6,6 is because each of these monomers contain a carbon chain with 6 carbons. So adipoyl chloride had 6 carbons, 1,6-hexadiamine had 6 carbons. So the repeating unit is a combination of 2 monomers, each carrying 6 carbon chains, so it's called as nylon 6,6. And there are many other versions of like nylon 4,6, nylon 6,10, likewise. Any number of combinations to make different types of nylons. Now we're going to look at 2 examples for predicting the repeating units for condensation polymers. Let's look at the first example. We're going to look at a reaction between adipic acid, which has 2 carboxylic acid functional groups at the end. Then there is 1,6-hexamethylene diamine, which has 2 primary amine groups at the end. Just like before, we have the nitrogen with 2 hydrogens in it, and what happens is this OH of the carboxylic acid functional group will grab one of the hydrogens in amine, and it will leave as a water molecule. So water is the small molecule produced in this condensation reaction, and you're going to have an amide bond. So here's the carbon with the carbonyl group, and you have the rest of it, rest of the molecule, and here we have again 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and at the end there's the carbonyl group, and at this end this OH can participate with another 1,6-hexamethylene diamine, eliminate a water molecule, and keep growing in this direction. So we're going to leave this end open. At this end there's nitrogen, and like before, this end of the diamine can react with the carboxylic functional group from another adipic acid molecule and form an amide bond at this end. So that's going to repeat, so we're going to leave that end open. We will cross it off with a bracket and put N to indicate there will be multiples of this repeating unit repeating. So this is the repeating unit for this polymer. Let's look at another example between this terephthalic acid and ethylene glycol. So what happens is the OH of the carboxylic functional group will leave with the hydrogen from the alcohol. So if it's a carboxylic acid functional group, the OH of it will be the group that will be leaving. So the alcohol will lose its hydrogen, while the carboxylic acid group will lose its OH. So again, water is the small molecule eliminated in this reaction, and we get an ester bond. So we learned in Fischer esterification when a carboxylic acid molecule and an alcohol react together, we get an ester, right? So here's the carbonyl group. The OH was lost, so there's a new bond between this carbonyl carbon and this oxygen. So that's this oxygen, and 1, 2. Here is the other end. So this OH can participate in condensation with another carboxylic acid chain from another terephthalic acid monomer. So we're going to leave this end open. At this end, this carboxylic acid functional group can also condense with another ethylene glycol molecule, so we're going to leave that end open. We'll bracket it off and put N to mean that this is repeating multiple times, so this is the repeating unit when you condense these two monomers together. Now let's look at an example of predicting the bifunctional monomers when you're given a repeating unit. So we're trying to do the opposite of what we did before. Before, you were given the two bifunctional monomers and asked to predict the repeating unit. But if you're given a repeating unit, how would you predict the two bifunctional monomers? So let's try this molecule. So you can see when you look at this repeating unit, there's an end with the carbonyl group and end with a secondary amine group. So this is where it reacts with the other molecule. And we see here an amide bond. That means the new bond was formed over here. So we break it at that place. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And here's the other carbonyl group. So these are the two ends that reacted. And we have a hint here. The small molecule that was eliminated was HCl. So it's likely that the chloride came from this monomer. And on the other end, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. NH, and this HCl was made by hydrogen and a chloride. So if the chloride came from here, the other hydrogen must have come from here. So there's two hydrogens. And the same on the other side. So now we were able to predict the two bifunctional monomers that condense to form this repeating unit. Let's take a look at a final example. If you have this repeating unit, how could you predict the two bifunctional monomers that combine to give this? The small molecule that was eliminated is methanol. So how could that happen? That could happen if, like, you could think, oh, maybe a CH3 and an OH combined. But what would cause a CH3 to leave just like that? That's not probable. So it's more probable that an OCH3 group combined with the hydrogen that was attached to another electronegative group, and there was a condensation at this point. So let's look at the monomers. This is where we have the bond that combine together. So it's probably the new bond is between this carbonyl and this oxygen. So let's draw this. Here's that carbonyl group, and let's leave this end open for now. And at the other end, we have another carbonyl group. So then the other part of the repeating unit, there's a CH2, another CH2 here, and another CH2 here, and then an oxygen, right? So let's draw three of these and leave these ends open. For methanol to be eliminated, we should have had a OCH3 group on this side and a OH group on this side, which would cause these two to combine and leave, and we still end up with this ester. So that makes sense. So this end should have another OH, and this end should have another OCH3. So these two are the repeating units that condense to form this polymer, this repeating unit. So there's a problem set that you can work out on, and if you have any problems, email me, and we will have office hours during regular class time on Monday. Thank you.